Well, good evening and Merry Christmas, all. I hope you are all having a lovely, lovely winter holiday. Now, I know some of y'all have most likely heard of Santa Claus, but how many of y'all have heard his whole story? The one that starts when he's a little boy and continues on until he's the man you all know today. Now, some of you might be familiar with a version of that story. This one ain't that.
See those mighty goats hauling gifts across the icy tundra? They're not doing it for free, and neither should you. The big guy's list grows longer every year, and being nice now means supporting his favorite drink. Faco Cola fuels the season's supply chain and your sense of obligation. Remember, the big guy's list starts with you.
Let's begin. The night he was born, the wind did not merely whistle. It lingered in the corners, breathing against the walls. A patient thing that seemed to watch. Snow fell in crooked spirals over ridges. The river began smelling faintly of iron and old pine, curling under ice that reflected the dull gleam of lanterns in town. In the small house at the end of the ridge, a boy was born, and the midwife, with her 30 winters of experience and her hands still steady from delivering children who would know nothing of the world's darker music, paused and said only, "There is something about this one, a weight the stars themselves cannot name." He was named Nicholas, though already he had several names pressed into the corner of his mouth by fate. The child who would wander, the boy who would bend the world softly to his will, the boy whose eyes held the faint glimmer of something enormous and unknowable. He did not cry much, but when he did, it was the sound of understanding. A child too alert, too clever, and too deliberate for ordinary rooms, ordinary hands, ordinary hearts. By the time he could walk, Nicholas moved with a certainty that unnerved adults. They said it was charm, that he had a way of coaxing the world to lean toward him with the twitch of a finger, a tilt of a head, a smile that seemed to offer kindness while taking measure of everything in its orbit. He watched clocks. He watched people. He watched the shadows cast by flickering candlelight, learning early that the world bent easily if you whispered to it to do so. He wandered into forests where snow lay like sugar over the frozen ground, where the air smelled of iron and pine and a faint metallic tang he could not yet name. Wolves passed by him, their eyes reflecting his own curiosity, and he learned how to move silently, how to watch, how to claim small territories of influence without ever touching them. He read the leaves like books and the branches like diagrams of a world he could someday control. It was in one such valley, rimmed with jagged glaciers, that he first encountered the elves. They were small, quick, with eyes like polished jet and fingers that moved as though the world itself obeyed them. And in that encounter, Nicholas realized something he did not yet name. He could bend not only the earth, but the creatures on it. He offered them gifts, taught them to fashion toys, to sing in small, harmonious choruses, to organize labor into delight. He did not know, and would not know for years, that he was already enmeshed in a pattern older than him, that civilization itself demanded obedience, and that obedience could be framed as joy. From that.
On December 18th, this day, 1972, President Richard Nixon addressed the American people to announce the beginning of Operation Linebacker 2, a massive aerial campaign over North Vietnam that will come to be known for its devastating destruction and loss of civilian life. The campaign, involving nearly continuous bombing, runs over Hanoi and Haiphong, who's already drawn criticism from the international observers who warn that the scale of the operation endangers thousands of non-combatants. Early reports describe widespread fires, collapsed neighborhoods, and rapidly rising civilian death tolls. Administration officials insist the operation is necessary to pressure North Vietnam back to the negotiating table. Critics respond that the action risks escalating the conflict further, deepening a war that has already claimed countless lives. Diplomats abroad express alarm at the intensity of the strikes, with several nations calling for immediate restraint. The Pentagon, meanwhile, maintains the campaign will be brief but decisive, though many fear that its legacy will be measured in tragedy rather than strategic gains.
From there, he traveled further. Lands where the snow burned like glass on skin, where mountains rose and fell like the bellies of whales, and skies swirled in green and violet ribbons like fever dream auroras. Everywhere he went, villages shifted subtly, markets hummed with a new odor, laughter gained an edge, children obeyed without knowing why. All of it became part of the early shape of his legend. And yet, even as he wandered, even as he taught and charmed and built myth around him, there was shadows. Tiny splinters of unease lodged into his dreams. Glances of the elves that lingered too long. The subtle tremor in a child's hands. The frost that seemed to whisper secrets. These were not yet conscious thoughts for him, but they lingered, a quiet trace beneath the velvet sweetness of his life. By adolescence, Nicholas had begun to realize, again without naming it, that he was unlike others. Where other boys sought comfort in warmth, in approval, in simple joys, he sought patterns. He measured the weight of every gaze, the cadence of every laugh, the price of every smile, and the world bent subtly beneath his attention, curving around his presence as if preordained. The elves' labor became a lattice, delicate, complex, and beautiful. He gave it joy and play, but also discipline and order. Every toy, every tiny bell, every ribbon became a part of quiet, relentless shaping of his world. One night, atop a ridge in a forest, where the snow glittered faintly with frost and moonlight, Nicholas paused. The village below slept, the chimneys puffing lazy smoke, and lanterns winked like distant stars. The wind whispered through the pines. He looked at himself, at the velvet coat he had begun to wear. Not yet the coat of legend, but soft and red, a herald of what was to come. He felt a satisfaction that was sweet and cold at the same time, a sense of weight unshared, a hunger unnameable, a power unseen but already claimed. The dragon in red velvet, he did not yet know, had begun to stir. Not in malice, no, not in overt cruelty. There was still charm, still laughter, still delight. But beneath it all, the creature within him took measure of the world, noting, calculating, recalling. The first breaths of myth, the subtle bend of reality told his orbit, the shaping of obedience's joy, all whispered together like an unseen chorus of voices. He slept then, but not in innocence. Cinnamon, iron, and ash lingered in his dreams, and as his eyes closed, the snow continued to fall in crooked spirals outside. Somewhere in the forest, the elves whispered to one another, small notes of joy, small notes of labor, small notes of fear. And the boy, Nicholas, the child, the dragon in red velvet, dreamed the worlds he would build, the myths he would tell, and the subtle, quiet rock that would always linger beneath the sugar. Join us again tomorrow night, and we'll finish this wonderful tale as Santa fully dons his red coat and becomes the man we all know him to be. Now stay good, sugar.